Welcome back, NFL fans, to another episode of The Way We See It. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Wesley Coleman as we talk about the latest and greatest in the National Football League leading up to the draft. Wesley, how's it going?
I mean, we're basically at the draft now, right? I mean, I know
It's
we're
close.
do you know what day are we releasing the Fans First Sports Network
The mock,
mock,
that's normally the
2-round
week.
mock?
That's normally
So
the meek of, yeah. So,
so we're getting closer and closer.
yeah, it's hard to believe. It's crazy when you think about it's March and it's April and I still got a month. Next thing you know, we're only 2 weeks away. So,
Still
with the
no
NFL,
trades.
what's that?
Still no top 10 trades or anything. It's so weird.
I think that'll happen closer to the
It's just
event.
weird. It's
It
normally
is
happened
odd.
by now. It's weird.
It is odd, but I want to talk about something in the first part of the show that, at least among Steeler fans, is hotly debated every single year. And it is, which do you value more when your team is selecting the best player available, or is it the best player by position? So, to me, to give you my little crux of this, best player available, for those that don't understand what we're talking about, best player available is when you just take your big board and that's where you rank the best players in the draft. Some people do 100, 200, whatever. And when it's your turn to draft, you look at that board and say, he's the next guy available. We're taking him, no matter what the position is. The other one is position of need. I call this the Mel Kiper theory. That is where you have your team needs listed out. You have the best players based off your team needs. You rank your team needs. And then as the players are drafted, you move them off. And then you say, okay, who's the highest rated player at a position of need? So those are two rules of thumb. And I think there can be a hybrid approach. But nonetheless, Wesley, I want to ask you first, what's your take on this debate?
To me, I don't really debate it in my head too much. I think it's best player available, period. I think it's easy for fans, and I think fans will get confused about what is a real position of need and what is a position that you don't like the player that's currently there. I think that gets confused a lot as well. We talk about before the draft, you take positions and you're like, you have the musts, needs, and wants, and which one you have to draft. There's always going to be the hybrid approach, like you mentioned, if there's like a tie.
Right.
But I am a firm believer in best player available. Most draft picks do not become NFL players or do not have a 3-year NFL career. Really, outside of the first round, it's such a low percentage of people that have a 1-year career. Like, I think it's so skewed in that you need the best player available at all times to maybe even have a shot of them having a second contract with your team or having a second contract in the entire NFL.
And that's fair. But I believe in a hybrid approach, because let's use the Cincinnati Bengals as an example. Okay. They have an entrenched franchise quarterback in Joe Burrow. They just signed 2 elite wide receivers in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to long-term deals. So if the Bengals are on the clock and they're looking at their big board and the best player available is a wide receiver, I'm not going to spend a first-round pick or a second-round pick or a third-round pick, most likely, on a wide receiver. Why? We just gave 2 huge contracts to wide receivers. I don't need another wide receiver. So I'm also, let's say for whatever reason, the Bengals are looking at a quarterback and the best player on the board is a quarterback. I'm not drafting a quarterback in those rounds either, because I have Joe Burrow. And so I think that it comes down to, it's a team by team approach. You could go as far as, I'm trying to think of another, let's talk Pittsburgh Steelers.
Should the Kansas City Chiefs have drafted Patrick Mahomes?
Should they have? Yes. I don't think Alex Smith was considered an entrenched franchise quarterback. Do you?
Yeah, he was. I think if you
Really?
look, I think he just got a big contract the year before. I mean, they had to trade him in his contract.
Well,
but
again,
they had identified him as their franchise quarterback.
But again, you just mentioned it. Okay. That's the way fans view it, and that's not the way the team did, or else they wouldn't have drafted Patrick Mahomes.
How about this? Big story that's been for years is, after the Chiefs, the person up to draft was the New Orleans Saints. And they ended up drafting Marshawn Lattimore, but it was known that they were going to draft Patrick Mahomes if he had fell. And it was a super weird situation where players are never in the draft war room. Drew Brees was in the Saints draft war room that day, and they have not had a player in it since, because that was very awkward. But there was going to be a really weird situation where Drew Brees is one of the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. He's got a ton of records, and you can
Right.
make a lot of cases of him being top 3. And it was still in his height of his career. Is it wrong to have drafted Patrick Mahomes if you were the New Orleans Saints?
And I think it comes down to an individual team by team approach. So you say, as a fan and as an outsider, that the Kansas City Chiefs viewed their quarterback situation as solidified for the long term with Alex Smith because they gave him that contract. Sure, that's fair. Internally, they clearly didn't, or else they would never have drafted Patrick Mahomes. Awkward or not, teams are going to do what's best for the organization and what they think is going to help win them games. And so, in that specific circumstance, you're looking at a situation where they saw Patrick Mahomes as a can't miss player, and he could be your franchise guy and be better than what you have now. If the Bengals, going back to that example, if the Bengals saw a quarterback that they felt could be better than Joe Burrow, I know that's not in this draft class, at least, then they would make that pick. But are you going to find a receiver in this draft class that's better than T. Higgins and Jamar Chase?
No, not at all.
Right.
And I think that there's probably, and we'll start getting into like the semantics of different positions. There's probably arguably never a spot where you're drafted in the NFL where a wide receiver is actually the best player available. That's one of those weird positions. And then quarterback skews the other way, where it's such a big deal if you accidentally hit on one that it's worth taking the risk. I think we've talked about it before. I am a fan of, I think that if not every year, every other year, you need to draft a quarterback and a running back in the mid to late rounds. Running backs get hurt. Running backs are not valuable on second contracts, except for a few, the special ones. So it is worth it to always have some new running back and always have a quarterback that you bring to camp that you start throwing the ball and you're like, oh, wow, he understands what the defense is doing over there. And just in case you get shocked, it's worth it for the hit rate on those. And they're never going to be the, quote, best player available when you're drafting, most likely.
Now, that there are positions, as you mentioned, that they are the antithesis, and they are like offensive line, offensive tackle. Not only do you have 2 starters on your offensive line that possess the right and left tackle spots, but they are unbelievably expensive. So a lot of teams might look at the writing on the wall. If they have a really good left tackle and they feel like it's going to be too costly, they might say, we're going to take an offensive tackle early, let them learn for a year or 2, and then that we have found the replacement. In that regard, I get it. But I just think that it's now we're not only talking about team by team approach based on what their roster currently looks like, but it's also position by position, which makes me think that the best player available in its purest form, I think, is impossible to do.
Yeah, I mean, so everybody's going to argue about this, but to me, the 3 best players in this year's draft are Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Ashton Giante.
Yeah.
And if you go watch, listen, running back shouldn't be drafted number 1 overall, but you go watch Ashton Giante's highlight against Oregon or watch his whole game against Oregon. That's the best football player out of college from last year, far and away, I think. I mean, Travis Hunter's, with his dual position threat makes it kind of different. But those 2 guys, nobody else is even close if we're talking about the best player available at number 1 and number 2. Those 2 guys are insane. But you're not going to draft a running back number 1 overall because you'd be crazy. And even if it hits, like, you're risking your career, right?
Do you think that, and then you bring up like the best players in the upcoming crop of players in this draft, do you think that this approach, best player available, best by position, best by team need, whatever you want to call it, can fluctuate based on the crop of players? Because everyone has said about this 2025 crop, this is the very end of those players that got extra years of eligibility because of COVID protocols and stuff like that. We're entering the end of that. So they're saying like this year's group is very top heavy, that after like round 3, it drops off a cliff in terms of the skill level and what you're getting for most bang for your buck, so to say. Do you think this even ebbs and flows by season and by year with these draft classes?
I think that's fun to say. And I think that every year we talk about it's top heavy for the top 15, or it's top heavy for the top 50, or it's top heavy for the first 100. The truth is that most of these guys are never going to be valid, good NFL players. Even in the first round, most of them are not ever going to be in a Pro Bowl. The
Right.
majority of them, I mean, so it's again, we want to build this up, and ESPN wants people to watch this for the entire weekend, and we're all going to talk about it and analyze. And it's just, the truth is that even in the top 10, probably half of those guys are never going to make a Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're just being honest, and it's such a crapshoot, and I think every team thinks that their team, or every fan base thinks that their team is bad at drafting because you're the one breaking it down and seeing that you miss on 75 or 80% of them. But that's how the whole league is. It's just,
Right.
so I think everybody kind of feels that way. I don't know. It's just, it's such a crapshoot. And like, I do love to talk about it. I love to break it down, and I can do a mock draft, and I think that I'm getting somebody in the 6th round that's going to be a difference maker in 3 years after he develops. He's not. He'll be a UPS driver.
Well, let's go. I don't want to go too far. Next week, I want to talk about trades and stuff like that. But I want to get your opinion on expectations for these players that are drafted. So let's go day 1, day 2, day 3. For those that don't know, and maybe you just woke up from a 20-year coma, day 1 is just round 1. Day 2 and 3, or day 2 is rounds 2 and 3, and then 4 through 7 are day 3. Based on where a player is drafted, what are your expectations for them within that rookie contract?
Yeah. So my expectation, if they are drafted in the 1st round,
Yes.
is for them to have playing time as a rookie.
So just a contributor in some way, shape, or form.
I mean, and sometimes those guys, is like you're talking about, they get drafted into a position where they're behind somebody, a linebacker or safety or cornerback or wide receiver even, and that's on special teams. Like,
Right.
there's, be on the field, have a stat.
Get
Is
a
honestly,
helmet on game day.
yeah, right, yeah. Um, is honestly, like, and is about as high of a wish and want as you could have for a player like that. For any player, for rookie coming in the NFL. After that, you're really hoping that, I mean, that they actually, out of the 1st round, you know, you're talking about 3 and 4 year contracts after that. You're hoping that they are making the team each year of their contract for like rounds 2 and 3, whether that's a backup that never plays or a special teams maybe contributor or quote unquote developing. You just want somebody that actually is on your team for 4 years of a rookie contract. I think is a huge accomplishment, because depth is so important. So at least of those people, at least they can be depth and get in there and understand where they're supposed to stand by year 2 or 3, right?
Yeah. And
And then
okay,
after and then
go
after
ahead. Go
that,
day 3.
I mean, like, if if they're if they make your practice squad, that's like a huge win. If they can, I mean, are anywhere on your 53-man roster at any point in their NFL career, that's a huge hit for a day 3 guy. It's so rare that they actually ever make an NFL roster.
I think mine, I'm kind of comparing my expectations here. So for me, round 1 pick, like you said, you have to contribute in some way, shape, or form your first year, even if it's special teams. Troy Polamalu in 2003 was nothing more than a special teamer. He got called a bust, and the dude now has a bust in Canton, Ohio in the
Well,
Pro
that was
Football Hall.
before his hair had grown out, and that's where his strength came from.
True. Samoan culture, look it up. Nonetheless, you go to day 2. So you're talking rounds 2 and 3. For me, I want to see a 2nd round pick to eventually turn into a starter. Somehow, some way, turn into a starter. Round 3, if they turn into a starter, that's a huge bonus. That's a huge bonus for me. And then, like you said, day 3 picks, rounds 4 through 7. If you can get something out of those guys, even if, they turn into a starter, like I think about the Steelers, you have someone like Dan Moore Jr., who is an offensive tackle, Texas A&M. I think he was a 3rd round pick, could have been 4th. I could be wrong. Turns into a starter, gets a huge deal with the Tennessee Titans in free agency. Okay, so what does he give the Steelers? I think he's going to give him like a 3rd round comp pick, most likely. So I think that, everyone, I love the fact, and Steelers fans, because I cover the team, they love to just root for the 7th round pick. Oh, this guy's going to come in and shake up the world or a 6th round pick, because Antonio Brown and Tom Brady were picked in the 6th round. They think that every 6th round pick has the potential. I don't know about that. I think those guys, if they make the team, like you said, hey, kudos. Good job scouting if you get a special teamer out of those rounds. But anything you want to add about the expectations?
Well, I just think that it's easy to sit there and look at the big wins of the best, seventh round draft picks, and the Saints got Marcus Colston out of the seventh round, and he's one of the best receivers in franchise history. And then even like undrafted players. Now, the Saints have been a place that undrafted players go because the Saints have had a culture for years of we don't care if we drafted you in the second round or if you're undrafted, the best player is going to make our team. So undrafted players do head towards that. And so, Lance Moore is a great receiver that was undrafted. Rashid Shaheed, current number 2 receiver of the Saints. Juwan Johnson, their tight end that just got a $30 million contract. Deontay Harris, who's signed a couple of deals in free agency and been a Pro Bowler. So there's ways to hit on those. It's hard to remember that for every one of those, there's like 100 people that did not ever make the team, and didn't actually. Some of them didn't even ever play in a preseason snap because it's so difficult to identify that.
All right, last question before we talk about the quarterback specifically to end the show.
Okay.
What does it take for you as a fan to label a draft pick a bust? So this is a debate that, again, it happens a lot in the world of NFL football. Some players, like I mentioned, Troy Polamalu was called a bust after year 1 because he only contributed on special teams. And this guy sucks. The Steelers traded up to get him, and he can't even crack the starting lineup. So what is it for you that is labeling a guy a bust?
Well, I'll say one caveat that I think fans like to call somebody a bust if their team traded up for them. I can't put the onus of that on the player. That's not their fault.
That's true.
If your team traded 2 firsts to trade up and get somebody, that guy's worth 1 first. He can't. Right. He's always going to be a bust if you're weighing him against that. So I just caveat. I want to say that we actually have to look at what the player does in the league. I think that so like first round, if your 5th year option's not being picked up, it's pretty. I think that's a bust.
Barring injury,
yes.
Yeah.
If your 5th year option isn't being picked up, I think that's a bust. And so what that's meaning is I need to know that you're a valuable starter in the league before year 4. Because remember, those get picked up a year early. So I think you got 3 seasons to prove that you're a starter in the NFL or contributor in the NFL that deserves a second contract. You got 3 years to prove to me that you're already headed down that road. What about you? Where do you kind of draw the line of how much rope you'll give them?
I think it falls in line with my expectations based on when they were drafted. So if a second round pick never becomes a starter ever, and then after their rookie contract, they go and play somewhere else and they bounce around the league, it's like, okay, that was a second round draft pick. Like that's a player that should have been a starter. Man, if my brain immediately goes back to Pittsburgh when you talk about 5th year options. The Steelers haven't picked up a 5th year option on a first round player in a very long time.
That's not a good sign.
No, it's not. And when you go back, I just did this recently for SteelCurtainNetwork.com and looked at their first and second round picks since 2018. Yikes. Not good. So I agree with you. Every team can look back on picks and say, this guy's a bust and this guy's a bust. But if a guy is drafted on day 1 or day 2, and even if they have a lengthy career, I don't necessarily think that's a bust, though. So let's say, who's the guy? Who's the linebacker for the Saints that went on to Philadelphia and had defensive player of the year? Yeah, so Zach Bond. You guys get him, and he doesn't pan out for you, but he goes to Philadelphia and turns into a stud. Is he a bust for the Saints as a player?
Oh no, not at all. I wouldn't put that on him at all. That was terrible. Just identification of talent by the Saints coaching staff.
Yeah. So I think that's involved in this too. A great example for Pittsburgh, like you mentioned, if a team trades up and drafts a player, that's not the player's fault. So the Steelers drafted Terrell Edmunds. The dude had a 3rd round label on him by most evaluators, and they took him in the 1st round because they needed a safety. We need a safety. And so they did the best by position instead of best player available.
Right.
And everyone's always upset with Terrell Edmonds. Like, well, it's not his fault that the Steelers overdrafted him by almost 2 rounds. And so he signed a 1-year contract after his rookie deal was up. They declined his 5th-year option. So it was a cheaper deal. And then he ends up bouncing around the league, and he's still, I think, a free agent or maybe something like that. But it's still, this is a unique dance. But I hate the term bust because there is a lot of factors. There's a lot of layers with this.
I agree totally. And also too, like if we're factoring in those positions like we talked about and the value of positions, I think that if we went through and you just like the best 5 running backs were of coming out of college were drafted in the first round, probably all 5 of them are at least going to have a good rookie year if they're given a chance. But nobody's going to do that because you're talking about short careers and all that. And so people are going to take risks on 3 or 4 quarterbacks that don't deserve to be in the first round. So those are going to look like more busts. You're kind of manufacturing more busts in that, with that seeking out those kind of positions.
Well, speaking of busts, let's finish this up with the quarterback class of 2025. Not the most stacked, we'll put it that way. When you think about 2024, man, that was a great group of quarterbacks. You talk about it.
2026 is going to be too.
That's what I've heard. Some people have said might want to pump the brakes because, like an Arch Manning could stay at Texas. I understand that. But the group that's probably going to be coming out is much better, more comparable to 2024 than 2025. And 2025 is being compared to 2022. I know way too much about 2022 because the Steelers reached on Kenny Pickett in the first round.
Did he get his second year? Did he get his 5th-year option picked up with the Steelers?
He hasn't been in the league long enough. But still, when I think about 2022, Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback drafted in the first round that year. That's
Super
how
Bowl
bad
champion Kenny Pickett.
Put some respect on his name. You're right. But this year, let's look at the crop of quarterbacks. Everyone says Cam Ward is by far and away the best of the crop. And after that, it's like, okay, who else do we have? Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart. You throw in a Tyler Shuck, Quinn Ewers, Will Howard. I always forget the kid's name that's from Syracuse who used to play at Ohio State. McCord, I think is his last name. You talk about Jalen Milroe. Am I forgetting someone, Wesley?
I mean, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon put up a lot of numbers.
Sure.
Did you say Riley Leonard from
Nope,
Notre Dame? Okay. I mean, he's kind of in there, but not because of his 2024 so much. Ewers, Tyler Shuck is a guy that's
well, let's talk about it. What's your take?
Did you and him graduate high school the same year? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, no, Shuck's 40. I'm 42, so it's a little bit different. No, in all seriousness, what is your takeaway from this upcoming quarterback crop?
It's awful.
Not 2022 bad, though.
I mean, maybe if Cam Ward doesn't hit, it's going to be that bad because I don't think any of these guys are going to be NFL quarterbacks.
I agree with you, but listen to this. In 2022, Pickett is overdrafted in round 1. Okay, the Steelers take him. No quarterback gets selected until round 3 after that.
Yep.
That's insane. That's not going to happen this year. You agree?
No, that's not happening.
There will be, I guarantee you there's at least minimum 3 quarterbacks in round 1.
Probably, and there definitely shouldn't be. And I also think that probably by the end of day 2, the first 3 rounds, I think there's going to be a pretty ridiculous amount of quarterbacks taken. And that's not, I don't think it's a good thing at all.
Well, I'm curious. What are your rankings with the quarterback? So do you agree that Cam Ward is the best of the group?
Yeah. And I if the Titans decide to trade that, I think they'll probably get some pretty ridiculous offers in way eclipsing what the Panthers had to trade to the Bears for their pick of Bryce Young, because he's, to me, I think far and away the best quarterback. And so they might get some crazy offers, even though it seems like they're kind of shutting down talks of they didn't even work out Shedeur Sanders, which is kind of funny.
But is Cam Ward a real deal in terms of like this guy? He's the best of the group, but is he for sure like a franchise quarterback? I can't say yes to that.
His fundamentals are terrible.
So that's what I'm saying. So people that would want to trade all of that to go get a guy that's not, this isn't Andrew Luck coming out of Stanford where you're like, he's going to be really good. Now Andrew Luck gets hurt and he retires early, but he was I think outside of like Peyton Manning coming out of Tennessee, maybe one of the most, this is the real deal, best bet. You're going to get a franchise quarterback coming out of college.
Burrow followed that too. I mean,
Yeah, I agree with that.
yep.
I'd agree because even Patrick
But
Mahomes, there were questions. He
a
came
lot
from
of
an
them.
air
Yep.
raid system. Is he going to be able to translate that to NFL success? Like
Yep.
there were a lot of questions with him.
Yep.
Cam Ward's not that guy, but let's continue.
He's not. He is in this draft because quarterback is so highly valued, and there ain't a number 2 that should be drafted in the first round.
Genius move. I mean, Cam Ward, I don't know if he had eligibility left at Miami. Genius move going out into this draft class. Because why would you want to put yourself in the 2026 draft class, which is better, and you could be the 5th best quarterback in that class, let alone now you're going to probably be the number 1 overall draft pick. So, hey, a smart move by him and his people. But go ahead, continue.
So, I mean, for me, I think yes, for this draft, Cam Ward is far and away number 1, and then I think everything else below that is an incredible risk or crapshoot, or just people who are not good at quarterback. I'll tell you, and it's we mentioned him, but you're going to see him in maybe at the top 10 of some of these quarterback rankings. But Tyler Shuck out of Louisville is, for me, the number 2 quarterback in this. Now you have to get over his age and his injury history, but for size and arm talent and fundamentals and what he does, that guy for me is the one that looks like an NFL quarterback, way more than any of these other guys.
Okay, so he's your number 2 in terms of prospects. So who's number 3?
Nobody. I mean, you probably are throwing the Shador Sanders in there, based on the 74% completion percentage, and I mean, he does take care of the football and has been raised in a professional football environment, and he doesn't get rattled by the situation. All there's a whole lot of negatives to say, but that's not what we're talking about. But he's probably your number 3. Just now, again, a lot of that is because the other guys below him that aren't good either don't have those things. At least he's got
got to
something.
go. Shador's got to go to the absolute perfect spot. Like
Really.
if he goes to the wrong team, it is going to be a nightmare. So I agree with you, though. I think he's 3. Who's 4? We're going to do 5.
I mean, maybe Jackson Dart, and I'm probably not. But I mean, I'm not trying to say he is good, but he can throw the heck out of a ball. But he has shown zero ability whatsoever to read a defense. He is much worse in the second half of games after the defense has keyed on what he's doing. And I think it'd be a nightmare in the NFL for somebody like him.
He's a project.
Yes.
If people think Jackson Dart is he's going to step in day 1 and be no. Half field reads. Lane Kiffin made his world
quarter field, 1/3 field reads. He's not that guy.
And that is with the college hashes too. Keep that in mind. So, but still, okay. Who rounds out your top 5?
What is that? That's 3.
Was that 5?
That's 3.
3.
Oh no, that was 4.
So Shador was 3.
Yeah,
Dart was 4.
You can. There's going to be debates between the athleticism and the physical gifts of Jalen Milroe, who measures like an NFL quarterback, and then you watch him play. I'd go Will Howard will be my number 5 over Jalen Milroe. Not a lot of arm talent necessarily for Will Howard, and playing with some of the best wide receivers in football. He was throwing to wide receivers that didn't have anybody within 3 yards of him. So the idea of open is very different. So his arm talent looked better than it was, because of how open his receivers were. But there's at least experience. He's a big guy, and he can at least read a defense a little bit, and isn't scared of throwing over the middle and things like that.
Yeah, this group is rough.
It's bad.
This group is rough. This could be a group, though, that I could see a 3rd-round pick being the best quarterback of the group. Just like in 2022, who's the best quarterback in that class? Oh, yeah, Mr. Irrelevant, a 7th-round draft pick in Brock Purdy. Who's the second best in terms of most accomplished on field? It's not Kenny Pickett. It's probably Skylar Thompson, another 7th-round pick, which is
I definitely think that. I mean, I see somebody like Tyler Shuck or Curtis O'Rourke from Indiana being drafted in the 4th or 5th, and then maybe you hear their name again.
Yeah,
for way after you've stopped hearing Cam Ward's name.
that's true. All right, man. This has been a great show. We talked about a lot of topics. That's what I like about the way we see it format. It's not just one thing. We're going to touch on a bunch of different things. But next week, we're going to be getting ready for the draft, and we'll talk about potential trades. Maybe there will be a trade. We don't know. But Wesley, why don't you tell us where you can find you on social media?
You can find me on X at whodatwesley13. There will be a mock draft show coming out on the Dome Patrol podcast this week. So you'll see that. And Jeff, where can we find you and your coverage of Kenny Pickett, Devin Bush, and Bud Dupree?
The Aaron Rodgers watch continues on the Steel Curtain Network, wherever you get your podcasts. We're all waiting for the big night ad of Pat McAfee, where it's not going to happen, and yet fans are thinking it will. But still, steelcurtainnetwork.com as well if you like articles and like to read words. Also, find me on Twitter at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. It's Masters Week. You're going to be seeing a lot of golf stuff there. But other than that, Wesley, man, thanks, and we'll talk next week. Take it easy.
See you next week.